So you're down to 2 different curriculum packages and you can't decide between the 2. Here's what I do. Hey everyone, my name is Mandy the Handmade Homeschooler, and I am a little bit curriculum obsessed. I just like books. I really do. My whole channel is pretty much just dedicated to books and reviewing books and reading books, curriculum books, fiction books, historical books, anything I can get my hands on really. So I review curriculum a lot, but I also talk about curriculum a lot here on my channel. And that's what we're gonna do today because it is almost curriculum buying season. I know I'm not the only one who is looking at different packages already. And I know a lot of you guys are too. So I've been getting questions about how to choose between 2 different curriculums. So whether it's like the same subject, you just can't choose between 2 companies, that type of thing. Like, how do you make a decision between those 2 things? I have a couple things that I consider my criteria for narrowing down what I want. And I've been doing the same thing for years. So I'm gonna give you kind of the breakdown of what I do, and maybe you can use that to help you decide. Curriculum can be a very personal decision because you have to take into consideration all kinds of things, everything from your budget to your religious views. So what I pick may not necessarily be the best fit for you. I was passenger princess this afternoon because I had to go get blood work done, so I got a treat. My husband took me to Dunkin' Donuts because he knows I love iced coffee. So here is what I do when I have the same subject, 2 different companies. How do I pick between the 2? So the very first thing my husband and I consider is worldview. That takes precedent over everything else. That's top. Are they Christian? Okay. Well, do they have a denominational view? What is that view? I research very heavily, which means that I look at reviews, like the videos that I make here for you guys. I look at the reviews. I look at the worldview of the reviewers themselves. Another thing that I'll do is I'll look at the sample pages. If a curriculum has sample pages in like a PDF form that I can look at before I buy, I will do that. And I will read sample pages from the textbook itself and see if I can get a good feel for their personal views, the views of the writer. You have to understand something when it comes to curriculum. There is no neutral. And I have a video about this. It's on my channel if you want to go watch, if you're like lost about what I mean when I say that there is no neutral. There is no such thing as a neutral textbook because every writer, even if they're an atheist, has a worldview. Atheism is a worldview. Atheism is a religion. So that will come out in the writing, and that will be pushed forth in the writing, whether they realize it or not. So that's something that you really have to consider, and that is the top thing that my husband and I consider before we ever make any type of purchases, is what is the worldview. And if it's not exactly what we believe, is this worldview something that I can either tweak or that we can use as a discussion point? So that's really, really important to us. So that's the first thing that I look at, and that's the first thing that is the most important thing. And if the worldview is too skewed for us, I won't even consider it. It'll go in the discard pile, and I will go with another curriculum company. Now, there are some companies that I deem as, safe because I know the writers, I know what their views are, I know the brand of Christianity that they come from, and that is something that my husband and I have agreed on that is a good fit for us. Which is why a lot of times you'll see me using a lot of the same brands over and over, like Generations, because that fits our worldview. So, for us, that's just like an easy decision. The one thing that I also consider is price point. Price point is also something that's really important. So if I find 2 different curriculum packages, for instance, and I like both of them, their worldviews are on par with ours. Okay, next, what are the price points? is this something within my budget? I always have some kind of budget for the year, and I try to stick within that budget. Now, price point is not something that I heavily consider because there's a lot of other things that I feel that are more important than the price. But, some years were more tight than others with the budget. So it really just depends on what's going on in our lives at that, particular moment. So price is another thing that I consider. And I know a lot of you are like us. You're a one-income household. Price is an important, thing for a lot of us. There's been curriculum that I have actually had to set aside and go, I can't buy them anymore because it's just too pricey for us. So yeah, and you got to think too, not everything is you get what you pay for. I feel like some companies you get more than you pay for and some you get less. Another thing that I consider heavily is how challenging is the material. I feel like there are some curriculum companies, I don't want to name names because it gets messy and people get very defensive. It's like when you speak out against like a popular pastor, it can get really messy. However, there are some companies where I feel like the material is just not very challenging, especially if you have an advanced child, like one of my kids is advanced. And I feel like I would have to add a lot of things to it to make it more of a challenge for him. I feel like he would be so bored. And he was. Like, we tried it out. It did not work. He was just bored to tears. And it didn't work. It just did not work. So I feel like the material being challenging is something that I really, really need in a curriculum, especially for my youngest. So that is also something that I heavily consider is how much work is this? Like, what am I going to be putting into this? How much am I needed for each of these subjects? There's a lot of different things to consider when you have different curriculum companies and you're trying to choose. There's so many different factors, but that is something that's important to me. And that brings me to my next one is how independent is this subject? Is this something that really heavily relies on me as a parent to teach? Or is this something that my child can do independently? I like something that typically falls, somewhere in the middle. I'm not totally hands off, but because I have several very serious medical conditions, there are times I just can't physically teach. And it can be very overwhelming for me if I get behind. So I like something that is a little bit more independent, and my kids typically prefer something that's a little bit more independent too. They're very independent type of workers. They're teenage boys. They would rather have something that isn't like totally hands-on with mom. They're just at that age. So, I like something that kind of falls in between where, I am still monitoring, but I don't want something where everything relies on me 100% of the time. So, there is that I take into consideration as well. Now, what I do is after looking at parental involvement, the price points, worldview, if I've been able to narrow it down to say like 2 or 3 options, what I'll do is I will show the kids and I will get their input. I will show them the ones that my husband and I approve of, and I will say, okay, go, make a decision. Tell me which one, tell me your opinion, and then I will get their input on it. And once I have their input on it, things usually get a lot easier with, decision making when that happens. I find that if the kids actually pick those things, I get less resistance from them during the school year because they made that decision. So even though I gave them the options, it's almost like when you have kids help make dinner and then they eat it, usually a little bit easier. It's kind of the same thing, because they had a hand in it, so they're more excited about it. This is kind of the same thing. It's, if they have a hand in picking it, you're gonna have less resistance from them during the school year. Typically, not every situation, I get it, nuances, gray areas, whatever. But for the most part, I have found that kids have much less resistance when they have had a hand in picking it and then mom didn't make all the decisions herself and then thrust it upon them. Now, that's not always, an option. I get that. I get that sometimes, you know, we only have what we have, and you know, maybe we can't do that. Maybe, you know, some families can't. I totally get that. I'm just saying, if you have the option, if you have the budget, if you're able to make those kinds of decisions and do those kinds of things, yeah, it's a great idea, I think, to have the kids pick. And that's what we do usually every year, is we give the kids options as far as what they want to do and the curriculum that appeals to them the most. And usually there's a very good return on that. All right, so those are my tips for curriculum picking. Tell me, what do you do when you're down to like 2 different options? How do you make that decision? Like, what's your criteria? I would love to hear it down below in the comment section. A lot of times I take advice from you guys from the comment section, so let me know. Give me your advice down below in the comments. All right, I will see you guys in the next video. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and of course, happy homeschooling.